Welcome! Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of form cues. Have you ever wondered how your brain interprets the shapes and structures you see every day? Form cues are essential signals that help us recognize objects, understand their boundaries, and make sense of our visual environment. Whether you're looking at a simple drawing or a complex photograph, your mind relies on these cues to distinguish one object from another. In this video, we'll explore what form cues are, why they matter, and how they influence the way we perceive the world around us. Let's get started by understanding the basics. Form cues are the visual hints or signals that allow us to perceive the shape, structure, and boundaries of objects. These cues help our brains interpret two-dimensional images as three-dimensional forms. For example, when you see a circle with shading on one side, your mind interprets it as a sphere. Form cues include elements like edges, contours, shading, and texture. They work together to create a sense of depth and solidity, making flat images appear lifelike. Understanding form cues is crucial for artists, designers, and anyone interested in visual communication. Form cues play a vital role in our daily lives. They help us navigate our environment, recognize faces, read text, and even drive safely. Without form cues, the world would appear flat and confusing. Our ability to interpret these cues quickly and accurately is essential for survival and effective communication. For instance, when you see a shadow under a table, you instantly understand that the table is elevated above the ground. This automatic interpretation is possible because your brain is constantly processing form cues. There are several types of form cues that our brains use to interpret visual information. The most common include edges, contours, shading, texture, and perspective. Each of these cues provides different information about an object's shape and position. For example, edges define where one object ends and another begins, while shading gives clues about surface curvature and light direction. By combining these cues, our brains can construct a complete picture of the objects in our environment. Edges and contours are among the most fundamental form cues. An edge is where there is a sudden change in brightness or color, indicating the boundary between two surfaces. Contours are the outlines that define the shape of an object. Our brains are highly sensitive to these changes, allowing us to quickly identify objects even in complex scenes. For example, the outline of a tree against the sky is a contour that helps us recognize the tree's shape instantly. Shading provides important information about the three-dimensional form of objects. When light falls on an object, it creates areas of light and shadow. Our brains use these variations to infer the object's shape and depth. For instance, a sphere appears round because of the gradual change from light to dark across its surface. Artists often use shading techniques to create the illusion of volume and depth in their drawings and paintings. Texture refers to the fine details on an object's surface. These details can be visual, like the roughness of bark, or the smoothness of glass. Texture cues help us distinguish between different materials and surfaces. When combined with shading and edges, texture enhances our perception of an object's form. For example, the texture of a brick wall is different from that of a metal sheet, and our brains use these differences to identify materials quickly. Perspective is a powerful form cue that helps us perceive depth and distance. Linear perspective involves parallel lines converging at a vanishing point, creating the illusion of space. Atmospheric perspective uses changes in color and clarity to suggest distance. These cues are essential for interpreting scenes with multiple objects at different distances. Without perspective, images would appear flat and unrealistic. Light and shadow are closely related to shading, but deserve special mention. The way light falls on an object and the shadows it casts provide critical information about its form and position. For example, a shadow on the ground tells us that an object is elevated. Artists and photographers use light and shadow to emphasize form and create dramatic effects. Occlusion occurs when one object partially covers another. This simple cue tells us which objects are in front and which are behind. For example, if a cup is placed in front of a book, the cup will block part of the book from view. Our brains use this information to build a sense of spatial relationships and depth in a scene. Relative size is another important form cue. When two objects are known to be similar in size, the one that appears smaller is perceived as being farther away. This cue helps us judge distances and the scale of objects in our environment. For example, a person standing closer to you appears larger than someone farther away, even though they are the same size in reality. Overlap, also known as interposition, is when one object covers part of another. This cue is closely related to occlusion and helps us determine which objects are closer. For example, if a tree overlaps a house in a picture, we know the tree is in front. This simple visual hint is used constantly in art, photography, and daily life to convey depth. Color can also serve as a form cue. Differences in color help us distinguish between objects and their backgrounds. Warm colors tend to advance, making objects appear closer, while cool colors recede. Artists use color contrasts to separate forms and create visual interest. In nature, animals use color patterns for camouflage or to stand out. Motion provides dynamic form cues. When an object moves, its shape and position become more apparent. For example, a spinning ball reveals its roundness through motion. Our brains are highly attuned to movement, which helps us track objects and understand their forms in real time. Animators and filmmakers use motion to bring characters and scenes to life. Gestalt psychology explains how we organize visual information into meaningful forms. Principles like proximity, similarity, closure, and continuity help our brains group elements and perceive complete objects. For example, we tend to see a series of dots as a line if they are close together. These principles are fundamental to understanding how form cues work in perception. Proximity refers to how close objects are to each other. When elements are near one another, we perceive them as a group. Similarity means we group objects that look alike. These cues help us organize complex scenes into understandable patterns. For instance, a cluster of stars in the sky may be seen as a constellation because of their proximity and similarity. Closure is our tendency to fill in missing parts of a shape to see a complete object. Continuity refers to our preference for seeing smooth, continuous lines rather than abrupt changes. These principles allow us to perceive whole forms even when parts are missing or obscured. For example, a dashed line is still seen as a line because our brains complete the gaps. The figure-ground relationship is a key concept in visual perception. It refers to our ability to separate an object, the figure, from its background, the ground. This distinction is crucial for recognizing forms and understanding scenes. For example, when reading text, the letters are the figure and the page is the ground. Artists use this relationship to create striking compositions. Sometimes, form cues can be ambiguous, leading to multiple interpretations. Classic examples include optical illusions like the Rubin vase, where you can see either a vase or two faces. These illusions demonstrate how our brains use form cues to make sense of visual information, sometimes in surprising ways. Understanding ambiguous forms helps us appreciate the complexity of perception. Artists have long used form cues to create compelling images. Techniques like contour, drawing, shading, and perspective are all based on manipulating form cues to guide the viewer's perception. By understanding how these cues work, artists can create the illusion of depth, volume, and space on a flat canvas. This knowledge is essential for anyone interested in visual arts. Designers use form cues to create effective layouts and user interfaces. By controlling edges, contrast, and spacing, they guide the viewer's attention and make information easy to understand. Good design relies on clear form cues to ensure that users can navigate websites, apps, and products effortlessly. This is why understanding form cues is so valuable in the design world. Nature is full of form cues that help animals and humans survive. For example, the stripes on a zebra break up its outline, making it harder for predators to spot. Birds use color and pattern cues to attract mates or warn rivals. Even plants use form cues, like leaf shapes and textures, to adapt to their environments. Observing nature can teach us a lot about the power of form cues. Modern technology, such as computer vision and artificial intelligence, relies on form cues to interpret images. Algorithms are designed to detect edges, shapes, and patterns, mimicking the way human brains process visual information. This technology is used in facial recognition, autonomous vehicles, and image editing software. Understanding form cues is key to advancing these fields. We encounter form cues constantly in our daily routines. From recognizing traffic signs to reading books and navigating crowded spaces, our brains are always processing visual information. Even simple tasks like pouring a drink or finding your keys rely on interpreting form cues. This automatic process is so seamless that we often take it for granted. Educators use form cues to enhance learning. Visual aids like diagrams, charts, and models rely on clear form cues to convey information. By highlighting edges, using contrasting colors, and organizing content logically, teachers make complex ideas easier to understand. This approach is especially helpful in subjects like science, math, and geography. Effective communication often depends on clear form cues. In presentations, advertisements, and signage, designers use bold lines, distinct shapes, and contrasting colors to ensure messages are understood quickly. Misleading or confusing form cues can result in misunderstandings, so clarity is key. This is why visual literacy is an important skill in today's world. Advertisers use form cues to capture attention and convey messages effectively. Eye-catching shapes, bold outlines, and strategic use of color all help products stand out. By understanding how people perceive form cues, advertisers can design more persuasive and memorable campaigns. This is why many ads feature strong visual contrasts and clear, simple shapes. Safety signs and warnings rely on clear form cues to communicate hazards quickly. Bright colors, bold shapes, and simple icons ensure that important information is noticed and understood, even from a distance. This use of form cues can prevent accidents and save lives, making them a critical part of public safety. Navigation systems, both digital and physical, use form cues to guide users. Road signs, maps, and GPS interfaces rely on clear shapes, arrows, and symbols to provide directions. By making navigation intuitive, form cues help people reach their destinations safely and efficiently. Video games use form cues to create immersive environments and guide player actions. Designers use edges, shading, and perspective to build realistic worlds. Clear form cues help players identify objects, navigate levels, and understand game mechanics. This enhances gameplay and makes virtual experiences more engaging. Filmmakers use form cues to direct the viewer's attention and create mood. Lighting, composition, and camera angles all contribute to how forms are perceived on screen. By manipulating these cues, directors can highlight important details, build suspense, or evoke emotions. Understanding form cues is essential for visual storytelling. Photographers use form cues to compose striking images. By focusing on lines, shapes, and contrasts, they create photos that are visually appealing and easy to interpret. Good use of form cues can turn an ordinary scene into a work of art, drawing the viewer's eye to the subject and telling a story through visuals. Architects use form cues to design buildings that are both functional and beautiful. The use of lines, shapes, and spatial relationships helps define spaces and guide movement. By considering how people perceive form cues, architects create environments that are easy to navigate and visually pleasing. Fashion designers use form cues to create visually interesting clothing. The cut, color, and texture of fabrics all contribute to how garments are perceived. By playing with form cues, designers can highlight certain features, create illusions of shape, or make bold statements through their designs. Product designers rely on form cues to make items attractive and easy to use. The shape, color, and surface details of a product influence how it is perceived and handled. Well-designed products use clear form cues to communicate their function and appeal to consumers. Branding uses form cues to create memorable logos and identities. Simple, recognizable shapes and strong contrasts help brands stand out in a crowded marketplace. By understanding how people perceive form cues, companies can design logos that are instantly recognizable and easy to remember. Social media platforms use form cues to organize content and guide user interaction. Buttons, icons, and layout elements are designed with clear shapes and contrasts to make navigation intuitive. Effective use of form cues keeps users engaged and helps them find what they're looking for quickly. User experience UX designers use form cues to create interfaces that are easy and enjoyable to use. By emphasizing important elements and minimizing distractions, they help users complete tasks efficiently. Good UX design relies on a deep understanding of how people interpret form cues. Accessibility in design ensures that everyone, including people with disabilities, can perceive and use products. Clear form cues, such as high contrast and distinct shapes, make content more accessible. Designers must consider how form cues are perceived by people with visual impairments to create inclusive experiences. Scientists use form cues to interpret data and visualize complex concepts. Graphs, models, and simulations rely on clear shapes and contrasts to communicate findings. Accurate use of form cues helps researchers share their discoveries and advance knowledge in fields like biology, physics, and chemistry. Mathematics often uses form cues in diagrams and geometric figures. Clear lines, angles, and shapes help students and professionals understand abstract concepts. By presenting information visually, form cues make math more accessible and less intimidating. Medical professionals use form cues to interpret images like X-rays, MRIs, and ultrasounds. Recognizing shapes, edges, and contrasts is essential for diagnosing conditions and planning treatments. Training in visual perception is a key part of medical education. Robots use sensors and cameras to detect form cues in their environment. By recognizing edges, shapes, and patterns, robots can navigate spaces, manipulate objects, and interact with humans. Advances in robotics depend on improving how machines interpret form cues. Virtual reality VR relies on form cues to create immersive digital worlds. Accurate shading, perspective, and motion cues make virtual environments feel real. Developers use these cues to enhance user experience and create convincing simulations for gaming, training, and education. In summary, form cues are the building blocks of visual perception. They help us interpret shapes, recognize objects, and navigate our world. From art and design to science and technology, understanding form cues is essential for effective communication and problem solving. By becoming more aware of these cues, we can appreciate the richness of visual experience and use it to our advantage in many fields. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of form cues.